We will begin our presentation momentarily. All the speakers are here and they are all muted. So in about 1 minute, we'll begin our breakfast. We're going to go ahead and start. So I'm going to turn this over to Charlita.
Good morning and welcome to the PrimaryOne Health Community Health Advocacy Breakfast. And I hope everyone is having breakfast or who has had breakfast will join us this morning. I'm having my coffee and hopefully a muffin in a few minutes. However, I did want to welcome everyone on behalf of the board and staff of PrimaryOne Health. We use these quarterly breakfast forums to address health issues and the social determinants of health. So much of what happens and so much of our outcomes are dependent upon those social determinants. In fact, 80% of our health outcomes are impacted by behaviors and social determinants of health. And so that's why we bring these community health advocacy breakfast forums to you so that you can learn more about what is impacting your health. You can learn more about how you can use the knowledge that you gain from the speakers that we share with you to help address those issues that need to be addressed in our community so everyone has a high quality of life and can live a long and fruitful and healthy life. I can't start today's forum without addressing the horrendous killing of George Floyd on Monday in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is one of many, and as my friends at the ACLU have articulated, it has been going on for quite a while. I want to read a brief statement from one of the policy directors, Paige Fernandez, who's a policing policy advisor for the ACLU. His statement: nearly 6 years after Eric Gardner's death in New York and 4 years after Philando Castile's in Minnesota, this tragic video shows how little meaningful change has emerged to prevent police from taking the lives of Black people. Even in places like Minneapolis, where chokeholds are technically banned, Black people are targeted by the police for low-level offenses and are subjected to unreasonable, unnecessary violence. Make no mistake, George Floyd should be alive today. The officers responsible must be held accountable. The public has seen the video. To call this a medical incident is an insult. I share that because we have many people within our own community who are very disturbed, including myself, as I watched the video and I've watched the demonstrations all across the country, including Columbus, Ohio. Now, we never condone violence, never, not by the police and not by the protesters. However, we do demand justice. And that's what this forum is about today. It's justice for everyone. It's ensuring that we have the legal representation needed depending on what the needs are, whether it's for child support, whether it's for court representation in a municipal charge, or whether it's a felony, whether it's immigration and immigration law, or whether it's protecting someone's speech. We want to make sure that these issues are addressed because they do impact the health of each and every one of us. So with that, I'm going to go into our first speaker, and we do have a chat box, as was shared in the beginning, for questions of our speakers. And if the speakers are okay, at the end of their presentation, CRIS, if there are questions for that individual speaker, Chris Stein, who is my wonderful assistant, who will be taking the chat box questions and sharing those. Chris, if there are questions after each speaker, we'll take a few and then we'll stop, and then I'll introduce the next speaker, and then we will continue. So our first speaker, I'm very proud of my first speaker. She's been a board member of PrimaryOne Health, and she has served on the executive committee, the finance and clinical services committee, and as the chair of the finance as the chair of the clinical services committee. She is now the chair of our board. Her name is Jacqueline Downey. She's a lifelong Columbus resident, educated in the Columbus public school system, an Ohio State alumni, and graduate from Antioch School of Law in Washington, D.C. Jacqueline has worked in the government, corporate, private, charitable, and political sectors. She has a specialized law practice in immigration, mainly family petitions, and is presently CEO of Adira Corporation, working on development issues in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Jackie, take it away.
Good morning. First of all, I want to thank Charlita and the Community Health Advocacy for allowing me to speak today. My topic that I was given is healthcare and the law. First, understand that healthcare law is not my specialty. I've done much research, and I am more confused than I was before I started preparing for this talk. Because healthcare issues, especially the legal ramifications of healthcare, are broad, vast, and confusing. I narrowed it down so I could understand how healthcare and the law fits into nonprofit healthcare entities like PrimaryOne Health. Clark Haverhurst at Duke University states, the evolution and current confused state of the law governing healthcare more often than not occurred by chance than by design. He went on to state that without a single entity exercising a plenary authority over healthcare, law, and policy, the legal system cannot easily set a clear or concise charted course. For the past 4 years, I have marveled at how PrimaryOne Healthcare team deals with the funding sources and the laws and rules and regulations. At any given board meeting, we have to approve several proposals. Now, each of these proposals come from the 4 entities. And I would like the first slide, meeting of the minds. And I'm just gonna have you hit the music. Sorry. Having a little bit of difficulty here.
Okay.
Can you do that? Just hit the music there. Can anybody hear that other than? We're working here. Okay, well, anyway, I'm just going to move forward. There is not a meeting of the minds, and I'm always asking what's going on, because we have to deal with the federal government, the state government, the city government, county government. We have to deal with the hospitals, the insurance company, corporations, businesses, and also our private entities that we do business with. And when I see the team at PrimaryOne Health, and that's the only source that I know that I can deal with, I am fascinated how they keep all this together, because the federal rules and regulations for one funding source may be different from the state. And then you have to look at what the city wants. But this team keeps it together, and they also make sure that the underserved population that is our mission are served, and they are great at their job. But if there was a meeting of the minds, it would be great, because then there wouldn't be as much confusion. There wouldn't be 18 different rules and regulations that overlap. And like I said, it fascinates me that this team is very successful. I believe that it is by design, and that keeps the constant friction and lack of consistency regarding who deserves health care. Do women deserve health care? Do women on birth control deserve health care? What about the homeless? What about addicts? What about people with pre-existing conditions? What about the obese? What about immigrants? What about the emotionally challenged? On and on and on. We don't know because the rules and regulations change all the time. But it's entities in the healthcare industry that treat the underserved. We have to be on top of those, and they stay on top of those. Healthcare, a right or a privilege. 40 top democratic countries have the right to healthcare for all their people. I think it is a basic right. In 2019, France was rated the top for providing healthcare for its citizens. They have a meeting of the minds. The right to healthcare for all people means that everyone should have access to healthcare services that they need, when they need them and where they need them, without suffering financial hardship. No one should get sick or die because they are poor or because they cannot access the health service that they need. It just doesn't make any sense to me that the United States does not have some sort of healthcare plan that makes it easier to access it. The next slide will be, excuse me, health privileges. Yeah, that's fine. The elephant in the room. And you know that Disney song that always, it's a small world after all, and it gets stuck in your head. I call it an earworm with these songs that can go on. You can start singing them every day and you don't know where they come from. I want you to get costs too expensive, too much money for healthcare out of your head. Everyone who talks about healthcare in the law will make it about money. It's just too expensive. It's just too expensive. It's not about money. Let's talk about ideas of delivery. The power of politics and systems interfere with honest discussions of healthcare reform. Money is brought up only to create pain, tears, and confusion. The real issues for discussion should be hard work, care, solutions, and delivery. Healthcare is many things, but money should never be one of those. The United States spends $3 trillion each year on healthcare. 1.5 trillion is wasted. The top 40 democratic countries in the world spend half as much as the United States does. And they have some form of free healthcare for all of their citizens. And they get better results. Even during the virus, people do not worry in some of the countries about if they can get tested, if how much it's going to cost, or if they can go to the hospital. Now, I know we're comparing apples to oranges. We're talking about fruit here, and we're comparing apples to oranges. However, the United States has one of the best systems in the world, and still the laws are not exact on how we should do these services. The state of Massachusetts has almost a universal healthcare system. They've done better than the state of Ohio, just because we have no rules and regulations. There is nothing standardized by law to make it okay, that you know what you're doing and that it's consistent all over the world. If you're receiving health care in the state of Massachusetts and move to Ohio, you have to change all of those things. You have to come in and look at what they have, and it may not be the same services. There should be some consistency, and there is not. I think we can combine all of the services, the good services that we find in some of these 40 countries. And then we take the best of those. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. When we take the best of those, we can find something good to make for the United States. Thank you very much. My sources came from the World Health Association, Google, and Black Laws Dictionary. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Thank you very much, Jackie.
Thank you.
Chris, are there any questions?
No.
Very good. Well, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next speaker, is Angie Plummer. She is the Executive Director of the Community Refugee and Immigration Services, otherwise known as CRIS, which is a nonprofit organization serving refugees and immigrants in Central Ohio. She has been with CRIS since 1998 and started as a volunteer lawyer. She became executive director of the agency in 2003. She is a 1989 graduate of the University of Dayton, where she majored in international studies and minored in German. She is also a 1992 graduate of the Ohio State University College of Law. She is admitted to practice law in Ohio by the U.S. Southern District Court of Ohio. Prior to working for CRIS, Angie worked for the state of Ohio and in private practice. She lists as her professional accomplishments the participation in resettlement in Columbus, Ohio of more than 7,500 refugees and the successful resolution of many family reunification and asylum cases. She lives with her husband and 2 children in Columbus, Ohio. Welcome, Angie.
Thank you, Charlita. It's really an honor to be asked to participate this morning, and special shout out to PrimaryOne, who recently stepped up to agree to do the refugee health screenings. So we really appreciate our partnership with you. So I have some slides that I'm hoping will pop up to guide me in my remarks. Chris, if you have those. Oh, great. Thank you. So in my brief remarks with you, it's hard to narrow down into 10 or 15 minutes all of the challenges in the law and immigration and as they impact refugees and immigrants. So I will give you the briefest CRIS commercial, and then wanted to talk about the refugee process and the law and how just the whole admissions aspect for refugees and immigrants comes into play. And then really because that has a significant impact on people's mental health. I think that often goes overlooked, the family separation that leads to tremendous mental health and pressure for people who are here waiting for loved ones. So next slide, please. So in the beginning, and I think that Charlita met us in these days in the garage at the temple on the east side, we started out as an outreach effort of the Buddha Mamaka Society, which was a group of refugees from Laos. Next slide. And so flash forward to today, we are out of the garage and in an actual building. And really the strength of CRIS is the diversity of our staff. We have over 50 employees from 15 countries, and they speak the languages of the people in the community that we're trying to serve, which is really essential in providing good social services. So go ahead and click about 6 times, and that will bring up the services. So very quickly, we are a resettlement agency for Church World Service. That's a national organization. So we bring refugees directly from overseas, starting from the airport, getting them in their initial housing. Part of that process is the refugee health screening, which PrimaryOne provides. After that, it's getting people into employment and English classes. We have an immigration legal services program. So prior to COVID, on every Tuesday and Thursday, we had walk-in hours that anybody could come in for a consultation with a lawyer. And we're still working to determine how to safely start bringing new clients back in. How we'll do that remains to be seen. But we are proud of our legal services offerings to low and no income community residents. We have a community connectors program. So this is mentorship, and have worked very closely with Columbus City Schools, Westerville, and some of the other districts to match youth with mentors. Our wellness program, recognizing that often there's a focus on self-sufficiency from the economic standpoint, mental health was often overlooked. So fortunately, we do have some funding to do linkage with mental health providers and provide programs like yoga classes or women's support groups that are other means of providing wellness in the community. Also have an Attorney General funded Victims of Crime program to serve as a crime victim advocates. And then on both ends of the age spectrum, we have a program, Help Me Grow, which probably many of you are familiar with, that works with parents to detect developmental delays in children, and then a nurturing parenting program with Franklin County Children's Services to help provide parenting classes. Those are in many different languages and taught in the home. And finally, a senior refugee program, because we know our seniors are at risk of isolation, have additional medical needs, and are proud that we can serve the senior community. Next. And we can never forget to mention how important it is to have volunteers. We couldn't do everything that needs to get done without a whole host of community volunteers. So we partner with churches and schools and mosques and all kinds of entities trying to be language partner for someone. There are lots of ways to get involved. So many years ago, when I was putting together a PowerPoint and came across this little clip art guy, it is a picture of an alien, which is, I'm going to cover just some most basic immigration terms. So alien legally is a term that covers all non-citizens. And I think sometimes when people first come to this country, they feel like they've come from another planet. And then within that category of aliens, you have technically non-immigrants. So that could be someone coming here on a student visa or coming here for visit or vacation. And then you have immigrants. And technically, and these words get tossed about pretty liberally. The word immigrant from a legal standpoint means somebody who is here in lawful permanent resident status. So someone who comes as an immigrant, typically one of two ways, either through a family-based sponsorship or an employer-based sponsorship. And so then someone has a green card. So lawful permanent resident, green card, immigrant, those are all sort of synonymous terms. And there's a very complicated quota system that Congress establishes that describes who gets to come from what country and what numbers. And so that kind of guides who's allowed to come in. So we at CRIS, and I'm eager to talk to Jackie more about her family-based immigration practice, but there are essentially, there's something called an immediate relative. So if I am a citizen, I could bring my spouse, my parents, or my children under 21 relatively quickly. They don't have to get in and wait in line for a visa number. But then there are all these other family-based categories that fit into that quota system. And there is a very, very long wait. And if you're interested to check it out, there's a visa bulletin that's published every month. So for these other family preference categories, so for example, I want to apply for my son who is 23 years old. It's probably a good, 5 or 6 years to wait for someone like that to come. And then there are certain countries like China, Mexico, India, and the Philippines that are oversubscribed. And so they take an extremely long time. So for this F4 category, for example, if I'm a US citizen, my brother is, let's say he's a Filipino national, and I want to bring him here, it's like a 20+ year wait. I didn't look at the visa bulletin yesterday, but it's extremely long wait for someone to come in through the process. So another important definition, the legal definition of a refugee is in front of you. So someone who is outside of their country of nationality. So that's the key. They have to have left their country of origin. There's another term for those who have remained behind, who may be in danger and have left their homes, but are still in their country. That's an IDP, internally displaced person. And to qualify for all the international protections as a refugee, you have to have left the country. And it has to be for one of these enumerated reasons: race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. So not economic hardship, but any of those reasons. And then there's this sort of companion term that you'll often hear, and that's asylee. And I like to simplify the distinction as where did someone get permission to be in the United States? So refugees that come in through the US refugee program have all been vetted abroad. They've gone through a long, extensive process and were approved by Homeland Security before they ever got on a plane and came to the US. An asylee is someone who came here, maybe as a student, maybe they came without inspection, just came across the border, and then once they're here, they applied for protection. So the way the refugee process works, person has fled their own, their country. I've been using the Bhutanese Nepali example as of late because we have such a big population in the city of Columbus, the largest in the country. Bhutanese Nepali refugees are in Columbus. Estimates are now in the 25,000 to 30,000 range. So Bhutanese Nepali were kicked out of Bhutan in the early 90s. Their first preference for every refugee is that they would be able to go home, but that's frequently not possible. So second preference is that they're integrated into the host country that they fled to. So in this case, that would be Nepal. But often that's not possible because the host country can't take them, won't give them the kind of rights that would be a durable solution, would never allow them to work or to become citizens. So then there is sometimes a third preference, a third opportunity, and that's resettlement to a third country like the United States. So yes, here's a picture of one of the camps in Nepal. And so there they sat for 20 years waiting for somebody to finally agree to take them. And the US agreed to take, I think it was 85,000 over a period of many years. And most of them have been resettled now who are coming. There's a small residual number of people, but most of them are already here. Next slide. The point is there are perhaps 21 million refugees worldwide, and less than 1% come to the United States. And this is a photo of a Congolese woman I took in a camp in Uganda, and it epitomizes for me the refugee experience, which is that of sitting and waiting, and someone else having control of your destiny while you sit and wait for some kind of a solution. So that is more commonly the refugee experience than I think that the general idea that people just show up here and wander in quickly. It's a very long, drawn out process. So I'm sure most of you are aware that the Trump administration has drastically curtailed the refugee program. The way it works by law is the president sets the number of refugees allowed in every year. So for FY 2016, it was 85,000. That's of course, under Obama administration. Obama set the ceiling for FY 2017, which was at 110,000. Then we had an election, so only actually 54,000 were admitted. And then once President Trump came in office, he set the ceiling lower and lower. This year it's 15,000. And with COVID now, I'd be surprised if we see 10 total. So once the refugees are vetted abroad, then the UN refers them to a particular country. If they're referred to the US program, then there are 9 national agencies that divide up that total. So when it was 85,000, they divide up that 85 and they would come to a local community. So our national agency, Church World Service, has a certain percentage of that total, and then they divide them up amongst local agencies who have capacity. So our staff, we have Somali speakers, Arabic speakers, Nepali speakers. So they might be, folks who speak those languages might be directed to us, or if they have family members, then they would be predestined for that location. So just a quick snapshot of our FY 2019 arrivals. Wanted to highlight Democratic Republic of Congo, where more than half of the people we resettled were from the Congo. The demographics have really shifted in the last few years. The year prior, it was Bhutanese Nepali were the largest number. This year, it's also from the DRC. So since Trump came in office, things have shifted a lot. Very few Muslims have been coming. And currently there is a moratorium on any arrivals because of COVID. So for me, my personal highlight has been Reuniting Families. And I think that's what's so painful for me to watch, the legal impediments that have been put in place to prevent refugees from arriving and joining family members since 2017. This was a family I worked with mom who had been away from her kids for 7 years and then got to go to the airport when they finally arrived. So that was definitely a professional high point. Next slide. In contrast to this little girl's name is Nemo, and we resettled her parents here who immediately applied to bring her through the legal channels. And for a variety of reasons, some of the roadblocks that the Trump administration put in place with family reunification took a long time. Finally, her case was approved. She's ready to go on March the 10th. And then the COVID moratorium hit. So she's with her grandma and they had to return back to the refugee camp where she waits. So I just wanted to spotlight the human toll, the human impact on, very specific people. And now mom and dad have to worry about her sitting in a refugee camp while the COVID crisis goes on over there. Next. So there was a really good in-depth report that just came out that details the impact of COVID-19 on non-citizens. It's the American Immigration Council, and I want to credit the authors there, George Lowry, Aaron Reichling-Melnick, and Walter Ewing. And they kind of break down some major areas of impact. Go ahead, next slide. So first is impact on immigrants and non-immigrants abroad. So these are impacts on the immigration system. So essentially, all visa processing was suspended and all refugee travel is suspended. Secondly, on processing at the US land borders, I think the statistic I saw was that of the thousands of people seeking asylum, only 2 people have been allowed in many months. The processing inside the US, so most immigration offices have been closed, and this therefore means there's no naturalization going on, oath ceremonies aren't happening, and there are many people hoping to naturalize before the next election, and that may or may not happen. Impact on immigration enforcement and detention. I've been getting, certainly at least in my circles, a lot of attention to the fact that there are a lot of immigrants in detention in facilities that are very unsafe. There was a federal judge that stepped in recently, and people in immigration detention may have merely a civil violation of the law, and they're not dangerous or violent criminals, and everyone should not face this kind of poor quality conditions in jail. That's my editorializing, but so those are certainly health issues for immigrants, those that are still sitting in detention facilities. Yes, and then the CARES Act, which the coronavirus, gosh, what's the acronym? Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. So there are, it's designed to provide relief, and there are a lot of ways that immigrants are left out of those provisions, like the recovery rebates. Many are not eligible. One issue in particular for what we call mixed status families. So that might be a US citizen who has a spouse that does not have a social security number. So that entire family is not eligible for any of the stimulus check because there's one person in the family who has the ITIN. Also, we've seen it with refugees, to qualify, you have to have a certain number of, you have to have been here a certain period of time, and they haven't been here long enough to be eligible. So pretty much those who came in fiscal year 2020, so since October, would not be eligible for the stimulus payment. And then they also face a challenge because they don't have the work orders to qualify for regular unemployment. They are eligible for the new pandemic unemployment, but the state is just getting that system up and going. So if you lost your job in March, you know, here we are in the latter part of May, and there's still not relief. And we've been seeing, and I'm sure many agencies are seeing, requests for help with rent. And I think that's our next crisis that's right around the corner. It's wonderful that there's been a moratorium on, or at least the courts weren't doing evictions. They weren't, but that doesn't mean people saved money and are going to be able to pay 3 months worth of rent, you know, come June 1. So I'm really concerned about that. And again, but getting back to mental health, you know, the amount of stress that everyone, you know, not just refugees and immigrants, but everyone is feeling with the job loss, with worrying about family members, is exacerbated when, you know, the immigration policies prevent your husband from actually joining you to help support your family, so that we have so many single female heads of household who are trying to navigate this alone. So that's kind of the lay of the land. My 10-ish minutes of summary of some of the impact on the refugee immigrant community. I hope that's helpful. One last word, we are trying to do some podcasts, like public service announcements in multiple languages, so that they can be shared through WhatsApp and other social media channels that the people that we, you know, in these communities actually communicate. We know word of mouth is most effective, so that translating a lot of documents may not actually reach people. It's, you know, it's a video, and trying to think through the formats that they'll really use.
Angie, there is a question.
Okay.
Are they concerned the immigration opportunity will diminish after the election?
Well, I think it depends on the outcome of the election. So I think there's concern about the outcome of the election, certainly. I don't know if that answers the question. I assume that was the question.
That was the only question we've had so far, so.
Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate your taking the question, and Angie, thank you very much for the presentation. We're going to go next to Patrick Higgins, who joined the Legal Aid Society of Columbus in September of 2018 as a staff attorney with the Housing and Public Benefits teams, where he helps tenants with housing cases and employees with wage theft and unemployment compensation cases. So a great pivot from Angie to Patrick. He received his BA from the New York University's Global Liberal Studies program, where his concentration was politics, rights, and development. Patrick also minored in Spanish language. After graduation, he received a JD from the University of Cincinnati College of Law, where he was an Arthur Russell Morgan Fellow in Human Rights, a position within the Urban Morgan Institute for Human Rights. Following law school, Patrick was an Ohio Legal Assistance Foundation Justice for All Fellow at the Ohio Poverty Law Center. Patrick enjoys working at Legal Aid because he believes that people's success in the legal system should be determined based on the merits of their case and not their income. He also believes that the law is one of the many tools that must be leveraged in a fight for social, economic, and racial justice. Patrick, take it away.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I appreciate PrimaryOne putting this on, for Tracy from my office, who I think is visible through Zoom right now as well, for helping facilitate us being here today. I also just wanted to reiterate what was already said about George Floyd. I think that's a really important context and frame through which we can talk about legal challenges. And my presentation today that frames how we interact with the criminal legal system. And so just wanted to say his name one more time, make sure we continue to reflect on that. I do have a couple slides that I just wanted to be on the screen as I introduce some topics. So I'll give us a second to pull that up and we can go from there. All right, so you may be able to see that I have a very brief presentation. I promise that will not be that brief in my comments, but just wanted to limit it, the visual side of things. So I work with the Legal Aid Society of Columbus. We're a nonprofit law firm that provides legal aid and civil matters to low-income individuals and families in the Central Ohio area. Now, we are limited territorially, but there is a legal aid agency that covers every county around the state. So in case there are folks that are listening in from elsewhere, something to keep in mind. We can go into the next slide. So I'm going to be presenting today about legal challenges, especially when it comes to reentry and criminal records, which are areas that I work in within my role. The Legal Aid Society of Columbus also provides legal assistance in areas like public benefits, including some of the discussion that we had about healthcare earlier, tax, consumer law, housing. So a lot of these issues that really impact the social determinants of health that have been referenced throughout other presentations. So another kind of plug for our agency, despite the many shutdowns related to the coronavirus, our office does remain open at this time. Not so much as in-person walk-in appointments, but we are taking phone call intakes, online intakes, really any way that folks can get to us. We're happy to help them out. So again, I'm going to talk a little bit about the reentry and criminal record space, and this next slide I will keep up for the duration of my presentation just to provide some context. So when I usually give presentations about this topic, I like to set the tone with how common criminal records are, both locally, statewide, and around the country. So 1 in 6 Ohioans are estimated to have a felony or misdemeanor conviction record. Now, that is a number that reaches nearly 2 million people in our state. And again, that is felony or misdemeanor conviction records. When we're thinking about criminal records, we're not limited to just convictions. So what a lot of folks don't realize is that arrest records remain public records. Dismissed cases, non-prosecuted cases, those cases also show up or can show up on background checks. So if we do take into account arrest records and non-convictions, that number actually jumps to 1 in 3 Ohioans. So just a remarkable number of people who have been impacted by the criminal legal system, and something to frame this discussion today. So the numbers, just, again, to continue this conversation as our community and others around the country reel from the disproportionate impact of the criminal legal system, among others. The system has a remarkably disproportionate impact on Black communities and other communities of color, and falls along the same lines of educational rates and just really a profound impact on folks here locally and elsewhere. So amid this, we see declarations locally that racism is a public health crisis. And I think that's another really important thing to acknowledge, is that as we think about racism beyond the overt, above the surface, what I would call the common conceptions of racism, thinking about the way that race feeds into the criminal legal system and its impact on our communities is really important. So to bring this back to the topic that we're discussing today, the legal challenges that we face as an agency. I'm going to talk, we are working on the civil side of the law. So my work is not in the criminal courts. We do not do criminal defense at Legal Aid. We are working with folks after their lives have already been touched by the criminal legal system. Now, that's not to discredit, there are clear health issues that come to us through policing and incarceration. For the sake of time and keeping within my own wheelhouse, I'm going to set that aside today, but wanted to make sure it was also included in the discussion. So what it means when we work on the civil side of these issues is that we are combating what we refer to as collateral consequences to criminal records. You'll see there, I think the second bullet on the slide, one of these major collateral consequences is for employment. When we talk about successful reentry or reintegration to the community after a person's been either incarcerated or otherwise impacted by the criminal legal system, employment, which is a person's livelihood, ability to pay rent, get access to health care, and many of the other determinants of health that we've already discussed, having a criminal record can be a major barrier to that. There are also some other major collateral consequences to criminal convictions, such as stigma and landlords doing credit checks and looking at a person's record, certain public benefits that can be impacted by a person's criminal record, impact on familial relationships and custody, all things that can be really drastically impacted by coming into contact with the criminal legal system. Now, collateral consequences, I think it's important to mention also that these are impacts of a record that occur well beyond the end of a person's sentence for a crime that they're convicted of. So, usually when we talk about the criminal legal system, folks tend to think about it as arrest to end of incarceration or end of probation, things like that. These collateral consequences can extend indefinitely, even beyond that last date that we traditionally think of. So long as that record remains out there and continues to impact the person, folks can be punished for the rest of their lives for a crime that they were convicted of in one of our courts. So to move beyond that into some of the more legal parts of collateral consequences, I want to talk a little bit, there are statutory collateral consequences as well. So beyond this stigma and employers and landlords looking at criminal records, there are hundreds of places in the Ohio Revised Code or Ohio law that say, if you have this offense, you cannot do this. I believe that number nears 900 different references in the Ohio Revised Code to where a person cannot do something or work somewhere because of a criminal offense. I think 450 to 500 of those are employment related specifically. So when we're talking about a person's ability to secure gainful employment, safe housing, provide for families, it's really an integral part of this discussion. So the collateral consequences are something, again, that extend far beyond the sentence. And that's where we hope to come in as legal aid advocates to work on these issues. So here in Columbus, there are a few of us working on the reentry team. Kathy Shear, my colleague, is another staff attorney. We were very fortunate recently to add Tracy Virgin as a paralegal to our team and really increase our capacity to do this work. So what does this work look like? Legal aid, as far as alleviating collateral consequences, can kind of fit into a few buckets. The two major are working on record sealing and expungements, which many folks are not aware are two separate legal processes in Ohio, one much more common than the other, and another remedy called a Certificate of Qualification for Employment, which we call a CQE for short, so we don't get caught up in our words while we present about stuff like this. Record sealing and expungement refer to a process of removing that record from public view. Record sealing is going to be a lot more common. That's the primary mechanism available to folks for making records go out of public view. It's akin to borrow an analogy from one of my colleagues, Melissa Will. Record sealing is like putting a record in a locked filing cabinet where only certain folks have the key. Expungements are going to be limited to mostly survivors of human trafficking. There's some great legislation that allows us to expunge the criminal records of survivors, so long as we can prove that their record is the result of being trafficked. Expungement is going to be a process that actually destroys the record. There's no locked filing cabinet. It goes away. Both tend to have, for the most part, a similar outcome of that record being kept out of public view. The more common situation, record sealing for most folks, is going to restrict those records from being viewed by your general employers, landlords, and other folks that you wouldn't want to see the record. It is going to remain visible to government entities, police, the courts, what have you. So that's something I'm not going to get too into the weeds on those processes, but wanted to make that distinction. The certificate of application for employment is another process that we help folks with in our offices. What that is a certificate that, when I referenced the statutory collateral consequences earlier, the places in the law that say, if you have this offense, you can't do this job or get this license. What the CQE does is it removes that mandatory barrier to employment or licensure. So where a person previously, even if they were well qualified for the job, but they had an offense that said, no, you can't do this job, even if the employer wants to hire you, it removes that mandatory bar and allows individualized consideration of the applicant. So that's something that there has been some initial research by some University of South Carolina researchers that came to Franklin County and researched the CQE's effectiveness. They found that folks applying for jobs with CQEs, their rate of positive responses from employers rose nearly to the level of a person without a criminal offense. So that's something that is really encouraging as we look for ways to help folks overcome those collateral consequences to criminal records. Now, I mentioned before that we are a small but mighty team in our office. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we have a very dedicated team of pro bono attorneys and other volunteers, including law students, that help us do this work. Looking back to that graphic on the screen of the number of folks that have criminal records, we see hundreds of these cases a year come through our doors, through whether it's individualized representation or assistance at one of our clean slate clinics. The need is still far beyond what we've been able to match. We know the need is out there, so that's something that we continue to engage with, is the way to get the word out, including presentations about this, that if folks have criminal records, even if it's dismissed cases or things that they do not think are still out there, it's something that we want to help with. To go back to this idea of our clinics, the ways that we can help, we've been working this year with a number of great community partners, the Franklin County Self-Help Resource Center at the Municipal Court, Equality Ohio, the Ohio Justice and Policy Center, have all teamed up. Earlier this year, we were fortunate enough to have an event hosted at the Columbus Urban League, where we worked on applications for record sealing and filed them on the spot with the help of the court for hundreds of individuals with criminal records. It's something that we look forward to building upon throughout this year. Unfortunately, we've had to cancel another event of that kind of magnitude because of the coronavirus, but we are looking forward to the future. And have details forthcoming about attempting to move that type of clinic to a remote process that would allow us people, while we all kind of keep our distance, for lack of a better phrase. So that's something that we're excited about. I hate to raise alarm, but as we look forward to the post-COVID world, or at least the world where folks are expected to go back to work as COVID still takes its toll on our communities. There was a lot of advancement of hiring folks with criminal records when unemployment was low. Employers and others were coming to the table. They needed a labor force, and started to take a look at folks with criminal records for a number of reasons. There are employers that want to hire folks with criminal records because they understand that folks with criminal records are valuable workers that can work just as hard, if not more, than folks without those records. My concern is as we get back into a world that has high unemployment, that folks with criminal records could fall further back down that list of eligible candidates for a job. So I think this work is going to be increasingly important, and we ask for everyone that's attending for your help in getting the word out that this help is out there for folks as they return to the workforce. And let's see here, as far as, again, looking forward to the future of criminal records and record sealing and other reentry work, a big thing that we need to do is demystify the process, the challenges faced in this legal system, especially in this area. Folks that are applying to have their records sealed or get a CQE, the inference from that is that the person had a case that they did not win, or at least were not found innocent prior in the court system. Many of our clients are hesitant to walk back through those doors. I think, that's something that we can all do as advocates, is demystify the process, pull back the curtain, and make the court a place that folks can continue to seek some of these remedies despite having negative experiences in the past. The courts themselves, obviously things are different right now because of the coronavirus. There's some mention before about, and Ms. Palmer's remarks about evictions and folks catching back up on rent. The Franklin County eviction cases are resuming this upcoming week at the convention center. And as the courts start to open back up, there are going to be some challenges to making sure that folks continue to have access, and we look forward to working on that and making sure that it happens. So I believe I've covered everything that I wanted to talk about as far as reentry and the legal challenges faced by folks as they interact with the criminal legal system. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And thanks again, really, for the time this morning to talk about this topic and to share this information.
Thank you very much, Patrick. We're going to give a brief introduction and ask Tracy Virgin if she would introduce herself. Tracy Virgin is also with the Legal Aid Society. Tracy, if you would take it away and introduce yourself, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hello, my name is Tracy Virgin. I am currently in transition mode from, I work with the Legal Aid Society of Columbus, and I'm currently in transition mode from working with our community engagement and pro bono to transitioning, as Patrick said, to our reentry team. I am looking forward to doing all that great work that we are doing with legal aid. I've had the privilege of working a little bit with reentry for our clinics pre-COVID that we were putting on for the clean slate reentry work that we're doing. So that's all I have. I look forward to it.
There were no questions from the people watching, so.
Okay, I'm going to ask a couple questions then. Based on your pro bono work, Tracy, in the community, what has been the biggest challenge for the residents of Columbus and Franklin County? What legal issue appears to be the biggest challenge?
Honestly, for our clients, and it seems to be with the low income community, it's everything. We have cases that go from bankruptcy, and that is a high number of cases. We have cases as far as evictions, that's another high number. I see, as Patrick said before, and Ms. Palmer, evictions are going to be at an all-time high as soon as the courts open, which is Monday with the convention center. So we anticipate that, and we are working hard on being able and prepared to facilitate services for those individuals.
Very good. I guess I have a question for everyone. You know, the justice system is just for some and not for others. And communities of color disproportionately are bearing the impact. African-American and communities of color are disproportionately bearing the negative impacts of the criminal justice system, of what is supposed to be a justice system for everyone. Evictions, you know, I don't know whether you've looked at the rate of evictions of people of color versus the majority or the Caucasian population in Columbus and Franklin County, whether you've looked at that with the criminal justice system. I know that disproportionately people of color, African Americans and people of color, disproportionately are those who are institutionalized in our jails and prisons. But are you seeing that with the cases that you all are handling? And Angie, you know, certainly you've got immigrants who are of color who are dealing with various issues. Can any of you speak to that?
I'll allow my colleague Patrick to speak to our statistics.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start off. I imagine everyone's got something to add here, but the yeah, I mean, at least anecdotally, I know our numbers. I don't have the data in front of me, but I mean, both anecdotally and from our data, yes, the numbers are Black folks and people of color are overrepresented compared to their portion of our population in our data, especially in our reentry work. Where, as you mentioned, yeah, the impact on people of color is staggering. I don't know if there's, you know, I don't want to say surprising because we know what it is, but it doesn't change the fact that it's staggering and devastating to our communities. I imagine the same goes for our team working in eviction court. And I looked at their data, but I feel pretty comfortable assuming the same from their team.
Angie, are you hearing from our immigrant and refugee populations of challenges with the criminal justice system or the legal system within Columbus and Franklin County?
Certainly, the language barrier is huge. From minor things like landlord, it's a holiday on a Monday when the rent is due, and landlord posts a notice in English that says, put the rent check in the back, which, and it might be a person who very, you know, wants to deliver their rent check in person, is trying to comply, and yet the landlord hasn't communicated with them in a way that's effective. And then there's a late charge. And then, you know, it just goes from there. And certainly we've seen instances where we had a Bhutanese Nepali man who littered and he was cuffed and his, you know, ID taken, and he was so distraught about it, thought he had disgraced his whole family because he threw a piece of paper on the ground. You know, it was out of proportion to knowing that if that were me, perhaps an officer would say, hey, you know, you dropped your gum wrapper. But this man was really traumatized by what happened to him. And so also with domestic violence situations, we see a significant problem with law enforcement not getting effective interpretation and using the perpetrator as the interpreter or some friend. And so making sure that law enforcement utilize the interpretation that's available to them so that everyone gets to communicate with them effectively. That's a really significant issue that we see.
Thank you very much. I understand we have some questions. Chris, if you would go ahead, please.
Sure. The first question is, are there organizations working with landlords to reduce eviction filings, medallion grants.
I can try to answer that one. I'm not familiar with that grant process. I know that as the courts navigated how to handle the eviction process, especially through Judge Barrows, there was input from the landlord, the property owners associations and representatives of landlords, in addition to legal aid representatives and others on behalf of tenants. And I know folks are coming to the table. It's ultimately, I think evictions can be catastrophic tenant. Landlords also have some financial interest in not evicting because of there's some financial stake in that as well. So I can't speak directly to that grant process, but I know there are folks coming to the table to reduce eviction filings. There was some money available through through PRC funds, the prevention retention contingency funds through JFS. And I'm sure there are some others out there as well to help reduce that. I'm sorry, I couldn't answer the exact question.
That's okay. That's okay, Patrick. Angie, do you have any information on the eviction?
I don't know of an organized approach, and I'm definitely be interested to learn more about this medallion grant. I mean, we certainly, because we have a relationship with a number of landlords, because we place people in those complexes, we have our housing liaison can sometimes get them to waive a late fee or to be a little more flexible. But you develop a relationship with the landlord, and then suddenly there's a new owner. And all those relationships that you built, there's a new property manager, and you start all over again with, no, in fact, you don't have to have this documentation for this person to live there. And, going through all of that process of rebuilding. So there's certainly a need, and I'm glad for the question to alert us to, some kind of funding that's available to do it on a larger scale, perhaps, rather than just, CRIS doing it because we happen to know a few landlords.
I apologize because I needed my glasses. It said mediation and then grants. So sorry about that.
Oh, mediation.
Mediation. And then the next question was, who are your organization's legislative champions? That's for Angie and Patrick.
Charlita Tavares. No, I will say, certainly it depends, at the federal level, Senator Brown has always been a champion. There is a liaison in Senator Portman's office who's fantastic with individual casework. Steve Stiver's office has really stepped up with family reunification. David Leland and is on our New American Advisory Council. I mean, there's locally, and the county commissioners, we couldn't be more fortunate. Hating to forget anyone, and really the mayor's office. I mean, we're really very fortunate in our central Ohio bubble. We have a lot of Joyce Beatty. We have a lot of people who appreciate the value that refugees and immigrants bring, and try to step up for them. So sorry, that was my trying to be glowing and inclusive of our champions.
Patrick?
So I'm going to toe a careful line here because we have some restrictions on our funding that prohibit us from endorsing any particular, you know where I'm going with this. But anyway, I mean, when I started working with Legal Aid Society of Columbus, I worked at our sister agency, the Ohio Poverty Law Center. I had a chance then, I know Senator Tavares worked on some important collateral consequence related legislation, as well as some others. So really, I mean, to generalize it, folks that are looking at collateral consequences to convictions, reducing the barriers to employment and housing for folks that have criminal records. There was an expansion of record sealing eligibility in 2018 that drastically increased our ability to help people which was huge. So those are the big ones for us. To continue along the line, so at the federal level, our agency is funded, at the federal level as well. Every year there are legislators that fight to keep the funding for legal aid agencies around the country. And that's really critical for us to continue to do our work as well.
Let me
Chris,
please.
before you go to the next question, I guess what that resident really wants to push is that in these serious policy areas, you really do need champions. Whether you're working specifically to address criminal justice reform, immigration reform, housing reform, whatever the issue, the policy area is, it's incumbent upon nonprofits to develop, educate, and inform legislators who can be champions, who have that as a passion. Because if they're not passionate about it, it's just one more bill coming across their desk, or one more ordinance coming across, or resolution coming across their desk. And so you want to work with those that seem to have an interest. And as Angie Plummer just shared, there are legislators that work, and their staff that work on different areas of immigration, and some are really partial to, like, the family reunification, or interested in other areas of justice reform for racial and ethnic populations. So I would just throw out to the audience that it is incumbent upon us as the people to educate, inform, and develop those champions for those issues, those policy areas that are important to us. And the topic today is legal issues or the justice system, but we need champions in all areas.
And
Chris,
I would
you have
like to
another
add,
question? Go ahead, Angie.
our city council, every single member, we're so fortunate with how much they've supported refugee and immigrant issues, really been very proactive in trying to see what they could do. So a big shout out to city council too.
Thank you.
I would echo that as well.
Thank you very much, both of you. Chris, do we have another question?
No more questions.
Okay, I've got a couple of other questions for the panel. And Tracy, feel free to chime in. The question that I have for everyone, where do you need the most help, where volunteers can assist you with the issues that you're working on?
Well,
I mean,
certainly
I
there's
think-
advocates. Go ahead, Tracy.
Sorry. I think we could use help in every aspect of our of what we do with legal aid. We are always welcoming to anybody that is willing to help, and that's not just attorneys, not just students of law. We welcome our arms to anybody that is able. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry, Angie. Go ahead.
No, we feel the same way. It depends on what gifts you have to bring, and that might be calling members of Congress to talk about legislation, or telling your neighbor how you met an immigrant and thought that this is a person whose story inspired you. It could be, when the first executive order happened that kind of shut down refugee processing, we had a lot of people saying, I want to do something, I want to volunteer, and so one woman had experience in fundraising. So we certainly put her skills to use doing fundraising. Somebody else might be interested in being a language partner. Now we're setting that up so that you could be an in-home language partner for someone. It could be helping walk a mother through the technology process so she can figure out how her kids can do distance learning come fall, if that's the landscape. So, like Tracy's saying, it depends. And we recognize the value of bringing those skill sets from the community and connecting them to the needs. And so do invest some resources into, volunteer management because that's so critical. We can't do it all for sure.
Thank you, Angie. Patrick?
The answer's already been very well said by the other two. I think, even outside our doors right now, I mean, beyond our traditional pro bono help, I think there's been a lot of support recently through COVID and otherwise of just, making sure people are aware of the services that are out there, especially when the need has increased so much, and just, even beyond the legal help, supporting neighbors and what they're doing. So that's all I'd add.
Thank you very much.
We have a question about how do you volunteer? An email, phone number from your organizations?
For us, it's volunteer. And on the website has a lot of information, and there's a form you can fill out too. Our website is crisohio.org, crisohio.org.
We as well have on our website a link that you can click on to volunteer. And our website is columbuslegalaid.org. And you'll scroll all the way down to the bottom of the screen and it'll say non-attorney volunteers versus attorney volunteers. So there are ways to volunteer with us as well.
And then I have a question to our friends at the Legal Aid Society. You host these record sealing events with partner organizations. How can organizations become a partner with you to host one of those? I'm thinking about PrimaryOne Health selfishly, because many of our patients have some legal challenges, and many of our patients certainly have immigration issues that they're dealing with, because about a third of our patients have English as a second language. So how could an organization partner with the Legal Aid Society?
I'm almost positive there's another link on our website as well for if you would like to, and I might be wrong with this, but partner with us. I can also put you in contact with she's actually been promoted from pro bono coordinator to she has a new job title, but I can put you in contact with her and she can kind of get the logistics going.
Can you give a phone number or email address for the audience?
I am unsure if that would be. I can give you my phone number and my email, and then we can go from there. My phone number is 614-737-0121. My email is T as in Tom, Virgin, V as in Victor, IRGIN as in Nancy, at columbuslegalaid.org.
And spelling Columbus all the way out?
Spelling Columbus all the way out. Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to share any contact information, website information for more information or assistance? Angie?
Yes, our website is crisohio.org, crisohio.org. My email address is aplummer, so that's APLUMMER at CRIS-ohio.org. Whoever did that dash for us did us a disservice.
Oh, believe me, I understand. We're all trying to make our email addresses as short as possible and not make them complicated. It is one of the hardest things to do. Any closing comments that any of you would like to make before I make some final, particularly if you have any upcoming events that you want to share with the listening, viewing audience of events that you might be having at your organization that you think is important for the community to know about? Angie, we'll start with you.
Okay, we have had a 5K fundraising event every year in the fall, and it's been such a joy to be together. It's going to be virtual this year. We've committed to doing it virtually because it didn't seem responsible to do otherwise, and try to plan something in person. So look for information about that. It will be on September the 26th. So that's a good way to help support us. The World Refugee Day is coming up June the 20th, and we have a few activities. We'll have a refugee speaker and a few activities related to World Refugee Day. So that'll be on our website. I would just like to thank you for including us and for all the work PrimaryOne has done for years with the refugee and immigrant community. I worry about many, many things, but knowing that we have a place to send people where they can get health care is very reassuring. I want to say that I am really worried about evictions and what's around the corner. That's going to be a tremendous impact. You know, we did a Giving Tuesday campaign specifically for emergency assistance needs, and we've already depleted the entire account because of rent assistance needs, particularly in the undocumented community where there are very little in the way of support and resources. There's going to be a tremendous need for help to prevent homelessness.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Angie. Before I go to Patrick and Tracy, I'm glad that you mentioned the Giving Tuesday, because there is the big give coming up. And that might be an opportunity for people to make donations to assist with a population that is in our community, certainly doing work in our community, and many times work that others don't want to do, that need help. And that's what we're supposed to do. So that might be another way for folks to give. You might want to share some information about the Columbus Foundation's Big Give.
Yes, we are participating in the Big Give. Certainly on our website, there is a link where someone can donate directly for emergency assistance. So please consider making a donation.
Thank you. Patrick?
Sure. First, to just put out some more contact information for folks that are interested in getting services from the Legal Aid Society of Columbus. We do have a phone number that is an intake line. That number is 614-241-2001. Again, that's 614-241-2001. That is our intake line. We can also take intakes online as well right now. So that's a big one. As far as upcoming events, things are, our in-person clinics and things are kind of on hiatus now, but we haven't stopped doing the work. We have volunteers helping with unemployment applications right now, as well as with applications for PUA and the other unemployment benefits right now. So that's something that's out there. It's something that we'll continue to do, and are thankful for the help that we've received in doing that. We look forward to doing a remote clean slate clinic. I think around the July timeframe is when we're targeting that. So just something to be aware of on the horizon. And beyond that, just another thanks for PrimaryOne for having us. I appreciate the opportunity to share the message, and just to kind of bookend the way the conversation started. I wanted to just acknowledge the immense amount of pain in our community right now, and I don't think it's new. It's just more visible this week on the news. So I just wanted to lift that up and acknowledge it. And we look forward to working on solutions in our community. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Tracy, anything else you want to share before I close out with some closing comments?
I just wanted to add that we used to, when pre-COVID, we were doing brief advice clinics, and we were going out to different areas of the community holding clinics so that individuals could get advice on almost any topic, legal topic. So we have switched those to virtual clinics now. And the individuals can call into our office using the telephone number that Patrick provided, and set appointments to speak to a pro bono attorneys to get their issues or questions answered.
Thank you. Thank
And
you
thank
very
you
much.
for having us.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the work that each of the organizations does in Central Ohio, and certainly addressing the needs of very vulnerable populations within our community. And as was shared, we really have to focus in on this whole notion of racism and racial justice in our community. If we're going to have the kind of community that is welcoming, that is supportive of all of our residents, we have to address racism. And certainly our communities of color are facing discrimination, facing challenges just because people speak a different language or have a different culture. I know that we have many languages and cultures within Central Ohio because generally it's a more welcoming community than others. However, we still have our own problems. We have issues with law enforcement. We have issues with people not accepting people who are different within their communities, within their schools, within their workplaces. And so we as a community have to work together to embrace the residents of our community. And I purposely use the word residents because it's not just about people who are citizens. It's about the residents of Columbus, Franklin County, and the Central Ohio area. They are in our community, working in our community, contributing to our community, and we need to appreciate and respect who they are, just as they should appreciate and respect who we are. So for me, this racism declaration by the City of Columbus, and we want to thank the mayor and the city council, by the county commissioners and Franklin County Public Health. We are going to be at the table with those organizations, with those entities, establishing strategies to reduce, to eliminate. The goal is to eliminate racism. We can't go more than 400 years from slavery, from before slavery, with even the founding of this country, annihilating Native Americans to take what somebody else wanted. So we've got to address these issues if communities, African Americans and communities of color, are going to advance, be healthy. As I shared at the beginning, the legal system is a part of the social determinants, where we live, work, breathe, worship, educate. All of those issues play an impact on our health outcomes. So we've got to work on this together, but we have to recognize it and say it. And as Patrick said, we have to keep lifting up the names of those who died needlessly. Whether they had an infraction or not, they weren't at a level where somebody else's life was in danger. And so excessive, brutal force is not necessary. We've got to address that. And so lifting up George Floyd and Eric Gardner and Philando Castile and others, all of these individuals will keep us focused on why we have to address this. My final comments get to COVID-19. As we've all discussed, we're having this virtual community health advocacy breakfast forum virtually because of COVID-19. We can't have the breakfast where we can partake in a scrumptious breakfast that is supported by one of our small racial or ethnic businesses within Central Ohio, because I try and lift up small businesses and expose our community to various small entrepreneurs within our community. So we had to have our breakfast on our own. But we wanted to do this so that we could bring this issue to our community. We also want to share with you that PrimaryOne Health is providing telehealth medical visits. So you can either have a telephonic visit or a virtual visit, just like we're having with your practitioner. new and existing patients. You can call 614-859-1851 to schedule a telehealth visit, or go to our website, PrimaryOne, O-N-E, Health, all one word, PrimaryOne Health at, it's PrimaryOneHealth.org. And then we are starting on June 1st, that's Monday, COVID testing. And so we will be testing those who are eligible. You can call 614-859-1895 to schedule an appointment. We're doing walk and drive up appointments. So if you are homeless, if you take public transportation, you can walk to our tents that we're going to have at 4 locations. We're going to have them at our Agler Road location. We're also having drive up walk-through testing at our South Parsons in the John Maloney parking lot, 1905 Parsons Avenue. We're also going to have testing at 1500 East 17th Avenue, our site that's combined with St. Stephen's Community House. We'll be out in the parking lot. And then finally, we'll be having drive up walk-through testing at our West Broad location. That's at 2300 West Broad, right there at Wheatland and Broad. And again, you will get a scheduled block appointment that you can just drive up at that time, and you'll be given the information to do the test. I just want everyone to understand that it's important to wear your mask, to keep the social distancing so that we can keep our residents healthy, particularly older adults, but I am so concerned about our young people because I see more and more of them not wearing masks. And you're carrying those viruses, even if you don't get it, you could be carrying it to your older grandmother or great-grandmother or to children. So do it not just for yourself, but for those that are around you. So wear your mask, stay 6 feet apart from people, and enjoy the outdoors as much as possible, but not in large group settings. Hopefully everyone has a great weekend. And again, if you want testing, Monday, June 1st, 4 sites, you can go to our website and get the information, PrimaryOneHealth.org, or call 614-859-1851. Thank you all again for being on our virtual community health advocacy breakfast forum, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.